My family gave my sister a key to the cabin I inherited and told her she could use it whenever she wants. I arrived to find strangers living there. A 29-year-old male, require some clarity here, as I'm starting to feel disoriented. My grandfather passed away 8 months ago, leaving me his lakeside cabin in his will. This was not unexpected. We were exceptionally close, and he had always indicated the cabin would eventually be mine. He taught me angling there, how to maintain the property, and we spent countless weekends together on various projects. The cabin held immense significance for both of us. Beyond its sentimental value, the property is worth approximately $400,000, situated on prime lakefront real estate. My grandfather was explicit in his will that the cabin should be entrusted to someone who would cherish and preserve it as a family heirloom. He selected me because I was the sole grandchild who demonstrated genuine interest in the property and assisted with its upkeep over the years. My sister, Jessica, 27, never showed any affection for the cabin growing up. She considered it dull and antiquated, preferring hotel getaways and spa retreats. She often complained about the insects, the absence of internet, and referred to it as rustic in a most dismissive manner. While Grandpa was alive, she visited perhaps twice in the last decade. Here's where the situation becomes complicated. Last weekend, I drove to the cabin for the first time since acquiring it, intending to spend some peaceful time there and begin sorting through my grandfather's remaining possessions. I had my key ready, but as I approached the entrance, I heard loud music and voices from within. I knocked, and a man I'd never encountered before opened the door, dressed in swim trunks and holding a beverage. Behind him, I observed at least 6 individuals lounging in my living area, and the scent of marijuana permeated the air. The man appeared irritated and inquired about my purpose. When I explained that this was my property, he chuckled, stating Jessica had informed them they could stay for the weekend and that her family owned the place. I was furious. I immediately contacted Jessica, and she reacted as if I were being irrational. She claimed our parents had given her a key months ago, telling her she could use the cabin for her weekend escapes whenever she wished. Apparently, she had been regularly bringing companions there and had even begun promoting it on her social media as our family's vacation cabin. When I informed her I had inherited the cabin and she had no authorization to be there, she became defensive, asserting that Grandpa would have desired the entire family to enjoy it. She insisted that merely because the legal documents bore my name did not mean I should monopolize it from everyone else. She actually labeled me selfish for wanting to evict her friends. The most disheartening aspect is that my parents are supporting her. When I called them, my mother stated I was being petty and territorial, and that family members should share. My father suggested a compromise, allowing Jessica to use it on weekends since I work during the week anyway. They repeatedly claimed that Grandpa would have wanted the cabin to unify the family, not create division. However, they're either failing to grasp or deliberately overlooking that Grandpa explicitly bequeathed the cabin to me because he trusted me to care for it appropriately. I learned from Jessica's friends that they had been using his fishing gear without cleaning it, leaving dishes in the sink for days, and someone had even carved their initials into his handcrafted dining table. There were empty beverage containers strewn across the deck, and they had apparently been building fires dangerously close to the tree line. I ultimately had to request Jessica's friends to depart, which resulted in a significant altercation. They were hostile and repeatedly maintained they had permission to be there. One individual actually debated with me about it, asserting I couldn't simply appear and expel them from Jessica's cabin. It was both humiliating and exasperating. Now my entire family is upset with me. Jessica is telling everyone I'm on a power trip and attempting to exclude the family from Grandpa's memory. My parents are pressuring me to do the right thing and share the cabin, claiming it's what Grandpa would have desired. They are making me feel avaricious and self-centered for wanting to uphold the actual provisions of his will. But I know Grandpa. He left precise instructions regarding the property's maintenance, and he chose me specifically because he knew I would respect and preserve it. He observed Jessica's indifferent demeanor toward the cabin for years. There's a reason he did not leave it to the entire family, he left it to me specifically. I'm torn between maintaining familial harmony and safeguarding something that held profound significance for my grandfather. The cabin is more than just a vacation spot. It's a legacy demanding responsible guardianship. Am I mistaken for wishing to establish boundaries? Should I simply permit Jessica to continue using it to preserve peace, even though she is clearly not treating it with the reverence it deserves? Any guidance would be greatly appreciated. I feel as though I'm losing my bearings here. Edit. Thank you for all the feedback. Reading through everything helps me recognize I'm not being irrational for wanting to protect what Grandpa left me. Some inquiries have arisen regarding the key situation. Apparently, my mother retained a spare key from when she assisted Grandpa with cleaning and gave it to Jessica without consulting me. I am definitely replacing the locks this week. Update 1: My sister has been advertising my inherited cabin as her vacation rental. It's been 3 weeks since my initial post, and circumstances have significantly worsened. Thank you to everyone who commented and helped me realize I wasn't being unreasonable. Your encouragement provided me the resolve to investigate further into what's been happening with my cabin. Firstly, I changed the locks immediately after that weekend. I hired a locksmith and had the entire property rekeyed, including the boathouse and storage shed. I also installed a basic security system with cameras around the perimeter. I did not inform my family of these actions. I simply proceeded. The true shock came when I began investigating how long Jessica had been utilizing the cabin. Recall how that individual stated Jessica told them her family owned the place? Well, I decided to examine her social media more thoroughly, and what I discovered ignited my fury. Jessica has been posting about weekend getaways at our family cabin for the past 4 months, essentially since right after the funeral. She's been tagging the location, sharing images of herself and friends on the deck, and even created a highlight reel titled Lake House Life. In several posts, she refers to it as my family's retreat and speaks of growing up there, which is entirely false since she barely visited. But here's the crucial detail. I found evidence that she's been effectively renting it out to companions. In one group chat screenshot someone sent me, Jessica was informing people they could use her cabin for $200 per weekend if they cleaned up afterward. She's been generating income from my grandfather's property while I've been responsible for the property taxes, insurance, and maintenance costs. I also discovered she's been regularly hosting gatherings there. Neighbors had actually been contacting my grandfather's old landline, which I still have connected, to complain about excessive noise and vehicles obstructing the narrow lake road. I had 17 voicemails from irate neighbors detailing loud music, individuals trespassing on adjacent properties, and someone's vehicle getting stuck in the marsh due to incorrect parking. The property damage is more extensive than I initially realized. Besides the carved table, I found cigarette burns on the deck railing, a broken window in the boathouse that had been crudely covered with duct tape, and someone had utilized my grandfather's vintage fishing tackle box as a cooler, ruining the wood and leaving rust stains. The most egregious discovery was spray paint on the dock, where someone had tagged it with some inane inside joke. When I confronted Jessica about the rental situation, she completely lost control. She screamed at me over the phone, claiming I was obsessing over trivial old items and that Grandpa would be ashamed of my materialism. She actually asserted that the cabin was deteriorating because I wasn't using it enough and that she was bringing life back to the place. I instructed her to cease posting about the cabin online and to stop bringing people there. Her response was to block me on all social media and inform our parents that I was harassing her and being domineering. My parents' reaction has been profoundly disheartening. When I presented them with the evidence of Jessica charging people to stay there, my mother said I was spying on my sister and that families should trust each other. My father actually suggested that Jessica sharing the costs with friends was responsible and indicated she was attempting to contribute to expenses. They entirely disregarded the property damage and neighbor complaints. The breaking point arrived last weekend. Despite the altered locks, I arrived at the cabin to find Jessica and 2 friends seated on the deck. They had entered through a window Jessica recalled didn't lock properly from her childhood visits. She was occupying my grandfather's favored chair as if she owned the place, and upon seeing me, she declared, "We need to address this situation." Jessica demanded a new key and insisted I stop playing games. She stated that denying her access to the cabin was punishing the entire family and that I was dishonoring Grandpa's memory by being so exclusive. Her friends simply sat there awkwardly while she berated me about destroying family relationships over a house. I told her she was trespassing and needed to depart immediately. She refused, claiming she had as much right to be there as I did because it's a family property. I ultimately had to contact the non-emergency police line to have them escort her off the premises. The officer was professional and explained that, regardless of family dynamics, I was the legal owner and could determine who was permitted on the property. The indignity of having police remove my own sister from my grandfather's cabin was heartbreaking, but what truly affected me was her complete lack of remorse regarding the damage or disrespect she had shown to his memory. Even as she was leaving, she was frantically texting on her phone, likely mobilizing more family members against me. My extended family has now become involved. My aunt telephoned me yesterday to state that I was tearing the family apart and that Grandpa would be turning in his grave if he knew I was keeping Jessica away from the cabin. Several cousins have sent me passive-aggressive messages about how family is forever and suggesting I should reevaluate my priorities. The truth is, I've been examining more of Grandpa's documents and discovered a letter he wrote to his lawyer concerning the cabin. In it, he specifically mentions his apprehension about bequeathing property to multiple individuals because he had witnessed other families disintegrate over inheritance disputes. He wrote that he wished the cabin to go to someone who would safeguard its integrity and peaceful character, rather than transforming it into a party venue. Reading that letter made me realize that Grandpa knew precisely what he was doing when he left the cabin to me. He could discern Jessica's attitude toward the property, and he made a deliberate choice to entrust it to someone who would show it respect. I've decided to install enhanced security, and I'm contemplating engaging a property management company to monitor things when I'm not present. I'm also meticulously documenting everything in case Jessica attempts to escalate this legally, though my lawyer assures me she has no claim to the property. The most challenging aspect is feeling as though I'm losing my family over this, but I constantly reflect on my grandfather and how he trusted me to protect something he cherished. I cannot disappoint him, even if it means standing alone. Edit. Some people are inquiring about the neighbor complaints. I've reached out to apologize and clarify the situation. Most have been understanding, and one couple even shared anecdotes about my grandfather assisting them with dock repairs over the years. It's evident he was well regarded in the community, which makes Jessica's conduct even more mortifying. Update 2-3 months later, family still furious. I will not share my cabin. It's been 3 months since I altered the locks and installed security, and I had hoped things would have settled by now. I was mistaken. If anything, my family has intensified their campaign to cast me as the antagonist in this scenario. The security cameras I installed have proven invaluable. In the past month alone, I've captured Jessica attempting to access the property 4 distinct times. The first instance, she brought a ladder and tried to enter through an upstairs window. The second time, she was accompanied by someone I didn't recognize, who was clearly surveying the property for easier entry points. The third time, she actually produced a crowbar and attempted to pry open the door before giving up and departing. The fourth incident was the most audacious. Jessica arrived with our parents and what appeared to be a locksmith. I observed the entire event unfold on my security application from work. The locksmith was actually questioning their right to change the locks, but my father repeatedly asserted they owned the property. When the locksmith requested documentation, my mother began to weep, speaking of how their cruel son had locked them out of family memories. I immediately contacted the locksmith company and explained that I was the legal owner and they were attempting to breach my property. The locksmith promptly left, but not before my father reprimanded him for not comprehending family situations. Witnessing my own parents try to force entry into my property was surreal and distressing. The family pressure has been relentless. Every significant family gathering, birthdays, holidays, casual dinners, has transformed into an intervention about the cabin. Last month, at my cousin's wedding, multiple relatives approached me to discuss my selfishness. My aunt cornered me during the reception and spent 20 minutes explaining how I was destroying the family legacy and how disappointed my grandfather would be. The most painful conversation was with my grandmother, Grandpa's widow. Jessica had apparently informed her that I was withholding the family from precious memories of her late husband. My grandmother, who is 84 and sometimes unclear on details, called me in tears, imploring me to let the family heal together at the cabin. She kept reiterating that keeping people away from the lake was not what Harold would have wanted. That conversation nearly crushed me because I could discern the immense distress Jessica had caused by exploiting our grandmother's grief. I attempted to explain the actual situation, the property damage, the unauthorized rentals, the parties, but my grandmother simply continued to repeat that family should stick together and that I needed to be the bigger person. Jessica has also intensified her social media campaign. She's now posting nostalgic photos of family gatherings at the cabin from years past, with captions like, "Miss the days when family mattered more than paperwork and some people forget where they came from." She's fabricated a narrative where I'm the greedy relative who sees the family gathering place and transformed it into my personal stronghold. Her friends have joined the online harassment. They've been leaving comments on my professional social media accounts, labeling me selfish and heartless. One person even left a negative review on my company's Google page, asserting I was unprofessional and avaricious in personal matters. I had to contact my HR department to explain the situation in case it escalated further. The breaking point occurred 6 weeks ago when I arrived at the cabin for a weekend and discovered evidence of another intrusion. Someone had gained entry, though I'm unsure how, and had clearly spent time there. There were soiled dishes in the sink, towels on the bathroom floor, and someone had rummaged through my grandfather's closet and dresser drawers. Nothing was stolen, but seeing someone pilfer through his personal effects felt like a violation of his memory. Most unsettling was what I found in the guest bedroom. Someone had been sleeping there and had left behind a note that read, "This place has too much love to be locked away. Jay would want everyone to feel welcome here." It was clearly referring to my grandfather, and the handwriting appeared to be Jessica's, though she denied it when I confronted her. I upgraded the security system again and installed reinforced doors and window locks. I also began staying at the cabin more frequently, partly to safeguard it, and partly because it's the only place I feel a connection to my grandfather anymore. My family's conduct has made me realize how much I need that connection to him, especially now. My parents have employed various tactics to convince me to share the cabin. My mother suggested I could have the cabin during the week and Jessica could have weekends. When I declined, she proposed a schedule where different family members could reserve time slots. My father even offered to fund improvements to the cabin if I would give Jessica a key. The most manipulative attempt occurred when my mother called, weeping, and stated that Jessica was succumbing to depression because she felt rejected by the family. According to my mother, Jessica had planned to propose to her boyfriend at the cabin because it was where their love story began. Another falsehood, as Jessica hardly ever brought boyfriends to the cabin when Grandpa was alive. I've started seeing a therapist to manage the family pressure and grief. It's been beneficial to have an impartial professional confirm that I'm not being irrational. My therapist indicated that my family is essentially demanding I disregard my grandfather's explicit desires and permit Jessica to continue behavior that disrespects his memory. What has sustained me is reviewing more of my grandfather's belongings and discovering evidence of how deeply the cabin mattered to him. I found journals where he chronicled specific enhancements he'd made, wildlife he'd observed, and peaceful mornings he'd spent on the deck. In one entry, he wrote about how much he hoped the next generation would comprehend what made this place unique. I also found correspondence between him and his lawyer discussing the inheritance. In one letter, the lawyer asked if he wished to bequeath the cabin to multiple family members, and my grandfather's reply was unambiguous. The cabin needs one caretaker who understands its value. Too many cooks spoil the broth, and too many owners ruin a property. Reading those words confirmed that I am honoring his wishes, even when it feels as though the entire family opposes me. The cabin is not merely real estate, it's a responsibility he specifically entrusted to me. Jessica made one final significant move 2 weeks ago. She appeared at my apartment with our parents and announced they had been discussing a family solution. She proposed that we place the cabin into a family trust, where everyone would have equal access and decision-making authority. When I refused, she burst into tears, accusing me of caring more about a house than my own family. My father stated this was my last opportunity to do the right thing before they considered legal action. I informed them that the cabin was legally mine, and if they pursued any legal challenges, I would countersue for trespassing, property damage, and harassment. They departed angrily, and we haven't communicated since. The silence from my family has been both serene and solitary. Part of me misses the connections I had with them, but I cannot disregard their conduct. They've shown no regard for my grandfather's wishes, no acknowledgement of Jessica's misconduct, and no comprehension of why the cabin holds such significance for me. I'm planning to spend most of the summer at the cabin, working remotely when feasible, and truly taking time to connect with a place that meant so much to my grandfather. I want to understand what he cherished about it and ensure I'm maintaining it as he would have desired. Edit. Thank you for all the encouragement. Several individuals have suggested I revise my will to ensure the cabin goes to someone who will respect it if something happens to me. That's definitely something I'm considering. Update 3 6 months later. I found peace. My family is still angry. It's been 6 months since my last update, and I wanted to share how things have progressed. In short, I've found tranquility with my decision, while my family remains convinced I'm the villain. But I've learned to accept that. The security enhancements were effective. Jessica hasn't attempted any further intrusion since I installed the reinforced locks and improved cameras. I believe the reality of potential legal repercussions finally registered after I dispatched a formal cease and desist letter through my lawyer. The letter explicitly detailed the trespassing incidents, property damage, and unauthorized use, and warns that any future violations would result in criminal charges. My relationship with my parents and Jessica remains non-existent. We haven't spoken in 4 months, not since my mother made one final attempt to manipulate me into sharing the cabin. She called, crying, and stated that Jessica was so devastated about losing access to family memories that she was considering relocating to another state. The manipulation was so obvious that I actually felt relieved rather than guilty. The extended family pressure has largely subsided, though I'm no longer invited to large family gatherings. My cousin's wife privately informed me that Jessica has been telling everyone I've become obsessed with money and property, and that grief has made me paranoid and controlling. Rather than contesting these narratives, I've opted to withdraw from family events entirely. The most painful loss was my relationship with my grandmother. Jessica convinced her that I was withholding the family from precious memories of my grandfather, and my grandmother passed away 3 months ago, still believing I was being selfish. I wasn't involved in the funeral arrangements, though I did attend the service. Jessica made a point of mentioning how much my grandmother had missed family gatherings at the lake house in her eulogy, which felt like a final act of manipulation, even at our grandmother's funeral. But here's what has changed. I've stopped allowing their opinions to dictate my experience of the cabin or my grandfather's memory. I've spent significant time at the cabin this year, and it's become a source of healing rather than stress. I've been systematically reviewing my grandfather's journals, and I've learned so much about his bond with the property. He documented seasonal transitions, wildlife patterns, and maintenance projects in incredible detail. Reading his entries has helped me understand not just what he cherished about the place, but how to properly care for it. I found one journal entry from 5 years ago that particularly moved me. He wrote, "Spent the morning mending the dock planks that winter damaged. Every repair feels like a conversation with this old place. Jessica visited last weekend and seemed bored by the quiet. She kept asking when we'd get Wi-Fi installed and complained about the mosquitoes. I understand not everyone finds peace in the same places, but I worry about what happens to places like this when people stop appreciating simple beauty." That entry confirmed something I'd always sensed. My grandfather knew Jessica didn't value the cabin as he did, and he made his inheritance decision accordingly. I've also discovered that my grandfather had been documenting family visits over the years. In one notebook, he tracked how often each family member visited and what activities they engaged in. The data was stark. Over the past decade, I had spent more than 200 nights at the cabin, assisting with projects and simply enjoying the tranquility, while Jessica had visited perhaps 15 times, usually for large family gatherings where she spent most of her time indoors on her phone. This documentation helped me realize that my grandfather's decision wasn't arbitrary or unjust. It was based on years of observing who truly cared about the property and its preservation. I've started honoring my grandfather's memory in ways that feel meaningful. I've restored the dock using his detailed notes about proper wood treatment and structural support. I've replanted the native flower garden that he maintained for decades, but which had been damaged during Jessica's parties. I even located his unfinished project list and have been working through the items he prioritized the most. The most significant project was restoring his workshop in the boathouse. Jessica's friends had used it as a storage area for party supplies, but I found his original tool organization system, documented in a sketch he'd made years ago. Spending hours organizing his tools and reading his notes about various projects has felt like continuing conversations we began when I was young. I've also connected with the lake community in ways my grandfather would have appreciated. The neighbors who complained about Jessica's parties have become friendly acquaintances who share anecdotes about my grandfather's helpfulness over the years. One couple told me he assisted them with installing their dock for free, and another family mentioned that he always shared vegetables from his garden. Learning about his reputation in the community reinforced that I'm not merely caring for a piece of property. I'm maintaining relationships and traditions that held significance for him. The financial aspect has also worked out favorably. The cabin's value has continued to appreciate, and I've been able to afford proper maintenance and improvements from my regular salary. I've kept meticulous records of all expenses and upgrades, partly for my own planning and partly because I wish to document how the property has been maintained. I've also established clear policies for any future family interactions regarding the cabin. Through my lawyer, I've drafted a formal statement that the property will remain solely under my ownership and control, and that any future inheritance decisions will be made independently based on demonstrated respect for the property and my grandfather's values. Most importantly, I've ceased feeling guilty about enforcing boundaries. My therapist helped me understand that my family's reaction reveals more about their sense of entitlement than about my character. My grandfather chose me specifically because he trusted my judgment, and honoring that trust necessitates making decisions that protect what he valued. I've started documenting my own stewardship of the cabin, partly inspired by my grandfather's detailed journals. I'm recording improvements, seasonal observations, and memories created there. Whether future generations will appreciate this documentation remains to be seen, but it feels like continuing my grandfather's tradition of treating the cabin as more than just a recreational property. The serenity I found at the cabin has been profound. Without the strain of family conflict and unauthorized visitors, I've been able to experience the tranquility my grandfather wrote about in his journals. I now comprehend why he loved early mornings on the deck, why he spent hours observing the lake, and why he found such contentment in maintaining the property himself. One morning last month, while seated in his favored chair watching the sunrise over the lake, I realized that I'd achieved what my grandfather had hoped for when he left me the cabin. I wasn't just preserving a piece of real estate. I was continuing a legacy of appreciation for natural beauty, careful stewardship, and finding peace in simple pleasures. My family may never understand or forgive my choices, but I've learned to accept that. Some relationships do not withstand boundary setting, and that's a cost I'm willing to bear to honor my grandfather's trust and maintain my own integrity. The cabin has become my refuge, just as it was my grandfather's. That's precisely what he intended, and I'm thankful every day that he entrusted me with something so precious to him. Final edit. Thank you to everyone who has followed this journey and offered support. Your encouragement helped me remain steadfast when family pressure felt overwhelming. I hope my grandfather would be proud of how I've cared for his beloved cabin and the values he instilled in me regarding responsibility, integrity, and finding peace in nature's beauty. For anyone navigating similar family conflicts over inheritance, I encourage you to remember that honoring the wishes of the person who left you something is more important than managing others' expectations or disappointment. Sometimes, protecting what truly matters requires standing alone, and that is acceptable. The cabin will forever be my grandfather's legacy, and I am honored to be its guardian. Deep Research Canvas.